would be helpful.
Would. Thank you very much indeed. So I'll give the last word to Rupert Lowe.
Well, yes, thank you very much. I found it very interesting what you're saying. I just got a question really, because this isn't my area of expertise, but I'm inclined to agree with you that we've got the worst of all worlds here. We've got private monopolies reporting to, as you say, boards of shareholders. So do you know, before, and this doesn't apply obviously to broadband, but before we got water and energy, how did the water corporations and the sort of, if you like, power utilities, how did they used to deal with it when they were in public ownership? Did they pass the best rates on to everybody, or did they have differential charging? Because I suspect a lot of this may have developed over time, and I've been quite interested to look at the fact it appears to me that Ofwat, CCW appear to be providing the role of ombudsman, as far as I can see from figure 2 here. So I was quite, do any of you know how it was dealt with? Because if we had a situation where, rather than all this business of talking about whether they've disclosed it, whether they've made it easier to obtain, and I agree with you, a lot of the people we're trying to help aren't going to have the mental capacity or indeed the intellect to get the best rates. As you say, you're a chopper and a changer and a bobber and a weaver, and you can, but they may not be able to. So do you know, how did they deal with it when they were in public ownership?
Being too young, I'm afraid. I'm so sorry.
Well, you probably are, yes.
Yes.
So nobody knows. Does anyone else know?
Before my time.
How did they deal with it? Did they have a social responsibility to?
I'm not sure. I think it would have been on rateable value to start with. I think these tariffs are newer, and that metering and things have come in after, and it would have just been on rateable value of your property. Is my assumption.
I think it's the big, certainly on energy, the proportion of your income that energy takes has grown substantially over the years, and especially in the previous few years. So I think the amount of attention that it faces, even when I started, was back in 2000, once it was privatised, energy bills were just, they were one of those pieces of housekeeping that I had to encourage people to do, because you're going to be saving 70, 80 quid, and, you know, whereas now it's, I mean, unfortunately the savings aren't huge now because of the market conditions. They're just such a huge proportion of your bid. You know, the typical use figure, which is it's a bit of a myth, the typical use figure, but is £1,800 or dropping on £1,600 for the new figure. It's now a huge proportion if you contrast that to the state pension of what people have. So I think, I don't know the answer to your question, I best be honest about that, but I think it's just become all more important.
I mean, I'm of adequate intelligence and I run lots of businesses, and we find it very difficult, even in a business environment, to be able to keep up with particularly the energy prices. And I think, you know, you've now got this sort of underworld of people who leapt up, who sort of disintermediate between the energy companies and the end user. And there's almost been a new market created for people like that. It's quite interesting. It's quite interesting. It's an interesting debate, Jeffrey.
Yeah. Okay. As an exemplar of short questioning, Rupert Lowe.
Well, you've chopped me off if I asked too long, Jeffrey. Yes, I think my question is for you, Chris. I just wanted to ask you, I mean, where in the list of your priorities do customers, and particularly financially vulnerable customers, where do they rank in your priority?
Well, our primary duties are to customers. We have 3 customer-focused duties. They feature in all the tools that Ofwat has, our price reviews, our oversight and support for major water investment programs, what we do around monitoring, casework and enforcement, what we do around markets and charging, but in particular, what we do around customer policy, courtesy of the customer-focused licence condition that water companies now have since February 2024, and the provisions of the Water Special Measures Act on company engagement with their customers. So I think the customer interest is front and centre in the economic regulation of water and wastewater services.
Okay, so if I look at figure 2, there's an energy ombudsman and there's a communication ombudsman. There doesn't appear to be an ombudsman for water. Is CCW performing that function?
CCW is performing that function.
They are performing that function. They are performing the function of the ombudsman, are they?
I think there is a complication around CCW's performing of that function. They were until very recently performing that function. Yes, I'd be happy to either us or CCW write back.
Because the chap running it, this chap Rob Wilson, as you know, is under investigation for fraud, as I understand it here, fraud investigation, and he's also when he was in Parliament, I think he claimed 9p for going 322 metres on a car journey. So it doesn't fill me with huge That doesn't fill me with huge confidence. But
I was unaware of that.
And
example.
on that, well, it's in the Daily Telegraph. On that, I think I'm right in saying that the complaints to CCW for billing were up 63%, and for affordability were up 110%. Does that sound right to you?
I think as a result of the pretty significant bill increases in April last year to fund record levels of investment, we were anticipating more customers contacting CCW with difficulties around.
Is that right? So because it's hardly surprising given that the real cost of water is up 20% over the last 4 years. So it's disappointing, I think, therefore, just to see that there's actually only a 13% take-up in this PSR. And I think that doesn't reflect well on you, and particularly when the report actually tells us that there are up to 50% of households who are in need of this.
I agree. We welcome the NAO's findings and we accept their recommendations, one of which is for us to try harder to improve that. As I said in answer to an earlier question, if 50% of households might be eligible to be on PSR and only 13% are, there is a gap in what companies are doing, but there is a gap in what the regulator is doing. I accept that in terms of raising awareness.
And one other thing I'd like to clear up with you is am I right in saying that under your permitted playing fair rules that bailiffs are an acceptable way to proceed? Because it appears that the use of bailiffs is on the increase, not the decrease.
So our paying fair guidelines set out principles and minimum expectations for services. They do have criteria around bailiffs. There was an increase in use of bailiffs.
But are you increasingly using bailiffs?
Off what does not use bailiffs.
Well, are they being increasingly used by the industry?
There was an increase in bailiff use after the pandemic.
You should have an interest in this, shouldn't you? I mean, you may not be actually doing it yourself, but you should have an interest in it.
We do have an interest in that, precisely because our paying fair guidelines do have requirements about how we treat customers in debt. Companies should be clear, courteous and non-threatening to customers. All communication should be designed around customer need. Fair tools should be used, for example, not threatening to disconnect water company. Customers cannot be disconnected from water and wastewater services, and only not using void property notices as debt collection tool. And enforcement action, i.e. bailiffs, should only be used as a last resort once all other options for repayment have been exhausted. Those paying fair guidelines are now enshrined in that customer focused license condition I talked about. We are monitoring that much more actively, and if we find bad practices, we will not hesitate to use those powers and take enforcement action against companies.
Yes, I think until you've got the number of people actually on the PSR up, the use of bailiffs, in my opinion, should be used sparingly and only for good reason. And I think my colleagues have quite ably underlined the need for you to make sure that your customers do understand how they can apply for this financial help.
Yeah, we agree, and we intend to play our part in raising awareness for exactly that reason.
And do you think it's wise that CCW are the ombudsman effectively for the industry? I mean, do you have a view on that?
I accept the premise of the question completely. That it's vital, in my view, that there is a customer voice in company decision making that is backed by credible legal requirements. It is a matter for government what form that voice takes in the new integrated regulator for England and the separate regulatory system for Wales. To my mind, it is crucial that there is a customer voice. The form it takes is a matter for government.